Alright, this is for the install on the 2013 through 2016 Dodge Dart Sequential Racetracks. This is going to be the basic layout of the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a trim tool, a drill with a 1/4 inch drill bit, a waterproof sealer / silicone. This is the tool that I use. You can use either this or a Dremel in order to actually get into the racetracks. And then in order to seal up and close it, I use a soldering iron that has a round nubbed bit, or if you don't have one of these or access to, then you can easily just use a plastic weld kit. Just spend plenty of time sealing everything up and then go back through with the silicone. Gloves, only because we all know glue gets messy. We're going to need a glue. I use something that tries to bond as quick as possible. That way you're not sitting for several hours waiting for glues to dry. A marker, so you can pre-mark all of your lines so you can follow everything with good, clean precision. Tape, just for being able to hold things in place while the glue dries. You're going to need a ratchet with a looks like a 10. Then here we've got the Hercules.com Racetrack Sequential Kit. You've got all the lights are going to come here. These are your controllers that I've typically going to pre-configure for you. And if you ordered the harnesses, those are going to be there. And then this is going to be the bag of clips that are going to plug it all in. So now we've got our trim tool. We're going to want to pull off these covers here from both sides. Pull off these guys from both sides. And the 9 clips scattered throughout. And then down here on the sides, you're going to want to remove this one and this clip on each side, and that'll give you access to the backs. Now you've got the trunk liner off, we're going to need to remove these 7 screws. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sorry, 9. And then we're going to need to remove the little cable that holds for the reverse camera. And then we're going to need to remove this harness here. That way when we go to pull the racetracks out, they come out clean. Next, we're going to go ahead and pull the racetracks out of the car, lay a towel down or some carpet or wherever you're going to work. You are going to want to pull these side trim pieces off here, off each side. And we're going to use our marker. We're drawing a line right on the back side, just trying to keep nice and straight. That way we don't affect these. That way we can make sure to get the trim piece back on when we're done. We're going to follow this line all the way down, all the way around. Okay, so if you do have the trunk pop button, then you would go ahead and remove those 2 screws, pull that out. And then as far as the inside, you're going to be looking to cut the inside edge all the way around, not going down, but at an angle. So if you've got a Dremel, which this is the attachment that I'm going to use here, that way I can just kind of go in and just cut sideways all the way around without plunging through the front of the face. And then here in just a moment, we're going to go ahead and get started on cutting. And so what you're going to do is we're going to take this tool, we're going to line it right along that edge there, and you don't want to let the blade face towards the red, because once you start making your way through, you can start nicking the red lens. So you want to kind of angle it down / back slightly when you go all the way through. Don't worry about getting through the plastic on your first pass. You can make a couple of just real thin, just quick passes with it. A Dremel is going to eat the plastic, so I would definitely say keep moving before you start melting stuff. These tools vibrate, so they don't really cut, they just kind of wiggle their way in. But that vibrating and the friction does end up kind of getting a little warm and can end up melting things as well. So no matter what, I always suggest move quick, get through it, and if you miss somewhere, it doesn't go all the way through, come back at it, rather than just trying to go full force and get it all done at once. Alright, so once you've actually gone through, you've made all your passes on the whole exterior, you want to go ahead and get it to where you can kind of see the red shining back through here at you. rather than keep going with the cutting, just because most of what's really kind of holding it still is only really basically what's going to be melted back together. So just take a flathead screwdriver, just kind of get it in and just lightly just pry, and you'll hear them just kind of bust apart. If it's still too stuck, then you can go back through and make another quick pass with your tool there, just to make sure that you're separated well. And then once you're separated well all the way around, then we're going to go back through and cut this. That way, once this is cut, you'll be able to feel and like actually like pull it apart, just because it's some of the angles in here can be a little tricky. This is usually the trickiest part to opening up the racetracks, is actually getting that pulled apart. When you go to actually make your separation here, if the clear is actually stuck with the red lens, take your flathead and start actually pressing the clear back into the rest of the housing. You want the red to be the only one that comes off, because the clear part is actually screwed in. So if you go to try to pull it all at one time, you're just going to bust it all up, and that's definitely going to affect the look on your... You've made your inside cuts and everything. This is basically so you can get an idea of what we were looking to separate. It's ugly as all get up, and it's really going to be just because of the angles. We can't really get too many tools in there, but that's what you're looking to separate when you go through to hit the trunk pop and you go in at an angle. You're trying to go in at an angle so much as to be able to cut this tower in half. But now that we've got all of this apart, now we're going to go through, we're going to get our handy dandy Torx bits, and we're going to remove all of these screws. You can actually go through, and when you go to remove this, you can cut all these tabs off, because it would just make it so much easier to be able to put that plastic lens back together when you get to that point. And don't worry about it coming loose or anything, because you've got all these screws are going to be holding it in place. So just to make things easy, if you want to, you can take either a flathead screwdriver or like a small pair of snips at any point where it kind of gets stuck and kind of bound up. You can get rid of that and just be able to pull it off. So now we're at the point where we're getting ready to start prepping ourselves to start installing the lights. You've got all the lenses and everything off. This guy here is our very back. So we're going to go ahead and start off by drilling our 1/4 inch hole here and here. Doesn't have to be anywhere like exactly along here. I would say to just try to stick to the outsides a little bit. That way you aren't crowding all of this up too much once you get to the inside. So we're going to go ahead and start off with our holes there, and those holes are going to allow the wires to meet right over through here, where it's all going to essentially just come through. So let's go ahead and let's make our holes. This part here, you want to take your time. You don't want to go too crazy, or else when you actually start coming through, you can kind of start destroying the reflective surface. So we're just going to take our time. We don't need to go too crazy. We just find ourselves just the middle spot there. We've made our way through the first layer. Now we're going to take our time hitting the second layer. And that's what we've got. We've got just a small hole. We want to try to keep this as small as possible, and that's also why I didn't put all of the connectors onto the actual kits, is because I want to be able to keep this hole as small as possible, just because everybody says that they don't like that hole in the very center, or the blank spot in the very center of the racetracks and that kind of stuff. I don't blame you. So the way to keep the smallest black spot or blank spot on the racetracks is to keep as small of a hole as possible. So this 1/4 inch hole is going to be just enough for us to be able to slide our wires through without getting too crazy. So we ended up taking our same 1/4 inch drill bit, and we ended up kind of burning this out just so it's a little bit taller, not wider, and that's why, again, we stayed with a small drill bit. That way we can still try to keep as narrow as possible. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to get our first 2 racetrack wires. We're going to take the longest end, and that's what's actually going to feed into the racetrack, going back out the back. We're going to do that on the top and bottom. we got our wire kind of strung through. It's not connected to anything yet, but we're going to go ahead and string it through. We want our lights, the side with the light is the direction that they face. So we want the lights facing and hitting that reflective background. That way it's got time for the light to spread and it comes out very consistent. If you try doing it with the lights facing out, it's going to look very hot spottish and you'll see each individual LED. So if you are not doing the side markers, at this point you can go ahead and cut these wires off. If you wanted to, go ahead and throw like a little small dab of like silicone or something. If you are going to do your side markers, now is the point that you'd want to go ahead and take your 1/4 inch drill bit and you're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole going right through. That way you can feed your wires going right out the back. Now once you've got your wires, the long wires fed through the back center on all of them, so I've got top and bottom, left and right coming through here, then we'll go ahead, we run the short ends here. If you aren't going to be doing your side corners, then these would be cut off. You can go ahead and just cut off those wires. But as far as the placement, because we want the lights to shine towards the back, then like say for example here on this row, it's going to go right along here and it's going to kind of get kicked up, pointing up towards that reflective surface. And so we're going to just end up gluing all this down. When you start getting down to this end, it's going to get a little bit annoying because it's a very slight curve and it's a straight strip. So it'll just be a little bit annoying, but just take your time. You'll be able to get it to lay nice. The bottom, because again, we're trying to get everything pointed towards the back, you're going to mount right on this surface, and you can actually use it like just at the edge, and that's going to help angle the lights towards the reflector. This right here, this, you'll just end up taking that, just kind of laying him right in there and just gluing him down, and that'll just fit that curve real nice, and it'll look nice and consistent by the time that we're done. So I've just run a bead of glue right along that edge. Now I'm trying to use the tape to just kind of help lock it in place just long enough for that glue to take hold. So now we've got these most of the way set. We're going to avoid doing this until the rest of this portion here is dry and set. That way this doesn't want to keep moving when we go to lock that in place. So everything's in, all lights are facing rear, that way they're all going to end up hitting off the reflective surface, and it's all going to end up just coming out as one smooth glow rather than a whole bunch of pixelated portions of individual LEDs. While we're waiting on our glue to dry on the racetracks, we can go ahead and get started on the side corner markers. We've already pulled the one clip and the one nut off of here, peel that back. There's 2 nuts in here and a clip. Squeeze the clip, it comes out, and then now we're going to just remove those 2 with our number 10. Now that you've got your side marker off, you're going to remove those 2 Torx bits, and we're going to cut all the way around this outer ledge here, all the way through. Try to avoid hitting these bumps here, because that's what is going to help align those, so we stay away from those. Just cut straight along. Now that we've got the lens off, we can go ahead and remove the screws out of the back, and that's actually going to help us in the front here, and that's going to help us eliminate that. So then we're actually going to take some electrical tape and just cover up the factory LEDs. That way it's our lights that are shining and not the factory ones. Because these actually are just a little bit long, I forgot to have those cut down before everything shipped. So you're going to go ahead and cut off 12 of the end run LEDs, and so you can cut off just 12 of them, and that will actually fit pretty well inside on both top and bottom. That'll get you right to the edge on both of them. Now that all of our glue and adhesive is all nice and set, it's about time to start putting it all back together. Before we do so, just because we were playing with these without gloves on when we first did it, we want to use a glass cleaner and all that kind of stuff, clean all this up, make sure you're not locking any fingerprints inside the lens or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and clean it, and then we'll start just placing all this back together. You'll put that in, put in all your screws, then we'll start putting this on, get it all nice and aligned, and we're going to use our tape to lock it all in place until we go on to the next step. One thing that is important is to be able to separate your right and left wires. So we went ahead and we just taped up the passenger side wires just in order to keep things from getting confused, so you don't start wiring things up and end up having different portions than what are originally designed to be going. So you'll go ahead, you'll fit the lens back on, just kind of tape it back into place, just kind of hold it together while you end up kind of using your soldering gun here. And so just basically just use that to go fit right through the curve. It'll melt it all back together. So I'll just do a small example here, just kind of show you exactly how that goes. You're going to want to make sure you pinch it back together, let the heat grab all that surrounding plastic from when we cut it apart, and just use all that just to backfill it and just fill it right back in. Do small sections at a time. Okay, so now that we've got our whole thing is kind of melted, fused back together, or if you're using a plastic weld, then your plastic weld should be dried and set and everything. So now we're going to go through, go ahead, run our bead of all the silicone and everything all around the entire thing. After that, I forgot to mention this stuff earlier, but this is the butyl that you'll end up using to fill in all of the holes that we ended up drilling earlier, and that's going to end up keeping us nice and watertight while still remaining flexible. So at this point, you should have already done your silicone all the way around the entire thing. Just make sure that you wipe the silicone in both directions. That way you make sure you get a good tight seal throughout the entire thing. The butyl, you'll just end up breaking off a piece, and you're just gonna stuff the hole where the wires go through. Just try and stuff it really well. Yes, it is pretty sticky stuff. It sticks to your fingers. If you use a little bit of water, it releases from your fingers pretty decently. So then you'll do that as well on the side markers. Then you can go ahead and put your trim pieces back on for the side markers. Go ahead, put the trunk pop button back together if you've got the trunk pop. If you don't have the trunk pop button, then you can go ahead and just seal up that entire thing, or you can try to just fill in with silicone. With our racetracks, where the wires come out through here, you're going to want to kind of lay out where they're going to pop through here. That way when we go to actually put the racetracks on, it'll just slide through with ease. You can see that we've got the side markers are already in, our wires are out and ready to be plugged in with the connector once we put all that together. When you're putting your racetracks back together, you're going to put your side markers on, drop your wires down through where the reverse light hardware goes. You can start putting in all of your screws all throughout. When you get to these end ones, you've got two different sizes. You've got a tall one and a short one. The tall one goes up this way. The short one, the taller end goes towards the back, and they just get put right onto those. So tighten everything down. But this is going to be the part that's going to be pretty hard to explain, but pretty easy. For the long ones that are coming out of the center of the racetrack, these pins are longer and the clip is longer. Pins go up on the same color that I guided you on when I made the stickers. You just press that, it clicks in place. Pins go up, press it in place, it clicks in place. For the other side that comes off the end of the racetracks, that one uses the much smaller clip. Again, there's little pins, those pins stick up. Except, unfortunately, I had to do the stickers upside down, so the pins are going to stick up through the open slot. That puts in place. clicks in place. It clicks in place. So once all those are done, then everything is going to be ready to start getting plugged in together. So you have your long pins that are going to go here. Those are going to connect to these wires here. Once these plugs get put on to this end, then these are what's actually going to go to the controllers, and that gets run to the... But now that the entire racetracks, everything are buckled in, everything's screwed down nice and tight, you're going to take your driver's side wires, tuck them back behind, let it run out right here next to the reverse lights. Same with your passenger side. You're going to let these just kind of come, and it's just going to kind of drape down. From the center of the racetrack, that's where it's going to plug into the side marker or the controllers over here. All the plugs and everything will line up accordingly. When you've got your harness configuration, you've got a short run and then a long run. The short run is going to lead to the passenger side, and then from there you're going to have a junction that goes to a much longer wire that has an addifuse here on the other end. This side, of course, goes here to the driver's side. And then also with your harness, the harness that has the green and yellow is the driver's side. The harness that has the orange and yellow is the passenger side. The side marker wires are actually going to connect in with the wires that came out of the end of the racetrack. So you can go ahead, connect those, and then your wires that go from the center of the racetrack over here to the controller, you can go ahead and connect those as well. But from this point, all of your racetrack wires and connections and everything should be plugged into each other. You've got your control boxes that are all plugged in. Those lead to your harnesses. So from there, you can go ahead, take your harness, plug in that side to there. That is going to go right into the back side of the corner markers. So that's plugged in. Then you've got the power wire that comes off the red. That is going to go tucked right back behind the carpet, all the way across over here to the other side on the driver's side, where that's going to get tucked right back here. And then you're going to go ahead, connect your factory harness here. All of your controllers and everything are going to be connected there. And then we're going to go ahead, take this long power wire and tuck it through the trunk, going up along the door jams and go up to the fuse panel up underneath the knee bolster. One final run on the wiring. So we've got our wires that come out of the center of the racetracks, get tucked back behind, they run down and will get plugged in with the controllers on each side. You've got the wires that come out of the end of the racetracks. Those come down and will get plugged in to the side markers. And so you make one continuous loop, okay? Now with our power wire, we've got the short run that comes from the passenger side. He gets tucked back behind this carpet all the way through, comes back up to the driver's side where it's got a little junction. That junction is going to get fed all the way up through the trunk and then into the front cabin, where you can see it comes out from up here, gets tucked back behind this wall in front of the seat belt, back inside here, down, across, down to the floor, from the floor all the way up to the front. So it keeps tucking underneath the little side guy here. For this, you literally just get your fingers, rip it off. One screw, two screw, and the third one is going to be right up, pretty much lined up with the brake. Once you remove those three screws, grab the pull down, and you got direct access to your fuse panel right inside. You want to find any fuse that is power non-stop, which is pretty much all of them except for those two maroon ones on the left side panel. Once we've got everything kind of ready to be buttoned up here, we've got all of our racetrack wires are kind of running in. The connectors from the end of the racetracks are going to get kind of bound up here at the top. Everything runs down the arm into the little cavity here, and the actual controllers, the sticky parts that are on the other side of this, get stuck right onto the body panel there. That way all the wires, everything's out of the way. So then you go ahead, fold that back, put all the clips and everything back in. Go ahead and put the trunk liner back together, put all the clips and everything back in. When you go through, make sure you test out the trunk, make sure that none of your wires get bound up here. Just to make sure that everything's nice and tight. Once everything's nice and tight, then go ahead, make sure everything's plugged in. You're going to plug in your added fuse at this point and go ahead and test the unit. Here on the passenger side, we've got what it looks like when you do the racetracks and the side markers. Here we've got the racetracks and factory side markers without the sequential built into it. So it does kind of play off a little bit, but it's not as perfect and as smooth flowing, but it goes pretty quick that you really don't notice all too much really. Alright, got lock, lock,